Hey, Damian Mason here with a question before we hop into this episode of the Business of Agriculture. If you farm for a living, you employ a lot of amazing technology, from your inputs that you put into the soil to the tractor that you sit in, your combine, and the amazing data that it harvests. But has your soil analytics kept up technologically with everything else in your farming operation? I would venture to say that no, it is not. Sure, you check for your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, your micronutrients as well. But what about disease pressure? Do you know what diseases and what pests you're going to face next year? No, you don't. But you can now figure that out with Pattern Ag's predictive analytics. Think about it. They can tell you now with testing what the likelihood of facing nasty diseases, things like cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome, what the likelihood of you having this in your field. Then you know how to prepare, how to treat, and where to invest your money. It's using technology to make you bigger yields and therefore make you bigger money. Go to www.pattern.ag to learn more. They are pioneering the way in predictive agronomy. Well, greetings and welcome to another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. Got a great topic for you. We're talking about something you probably have not heard about. In fact, it was brand new to me, which is why I'm bringing it to you. My guest is Alec Bean, and he presented me with an idea, and he said, hey, have you ever heard about depreciating excess fertility? And I said, what? So this discussion today, as ranging as it may be, is going to get back to something that is, I think, going to be a hot topic, and it might be something that you or someone you know in the business of agriculture can benefit from. We're talking about taking excess fertility in the farmland and using it as a depreciation on your taxes to minimize then, or to deduct then what your tax burden will be. This is a brand new idea. He presented to me, and I said, you know what? I think there's something a lot of people can benefit from. So Alec and I met. I was a speaker at the Illinois Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. Did I get that right? Association.
Yes,
about 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. And at that conference, he was sitting there and then has kept up with our podcast ever since. He presented me with this subject, and I said, I think that's a cool thing. So your business, you are in the farm business from the standpoint of a consultant, soil consultant, agronomic consultant, right?
Absolutely. So we are the expert providers in agronomic consultation, and we are experts in soil testing, crop consultation, and most recently, what we're going to be talking about today, IRS Section 180 reporting, which could potentially lead to depreciation on your taxes. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's neat is you were already out there. You were boots on the ground. You had agricultural clients, landowners, farmers, and you were the, and we're in an era. Some of the people that don't come from an ag background listen to my stuff, and they learn like we're in a more advanced area than a lot of people in suburbia think. A large scale farming operation in central Illinois where you are has a lot of different consultants, and you're one of them. And your role is to come in and help them with manage their land, essentially, right?
Absolutely. So you're right. My company has been in business for over 40 years. I haven't been the owner for 40 years. I purchased the company in 2016. But we really made a name for ourselves in that independent agronomic advisory role, specifically soil testing. And so, this was about a few years ago. One of my farm manager clients, he had asked me, "Hey, have you heard of depreciating excess fertility?" I said, no, I really hadn't. But I did say, I'm going to research that. And I researched it, and I thought that, the role that we're serving to our clients in that soil testing space, this was a no-brainer to jump over and start helping folks potentially depreciate some value on their taxes.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that first off, it's almost hard to even get your hands around. Let's go ahead and talk, I guess, again, you already know about the soils. You're an agronomic consultant, so to speak. Your byline on your email says licensed real estate broker at Agricultural Soil Management. It doesn't say tax expert, which let's go ahead and just get that out of the way. You're not a CPA.
Correct. Yeah, and that's great that you brought that up. Every conversation I have that's in regards to this, I lead off by saying, Alec Bean, myself, or Agricultural Soil Management, my company, makes no representations regarding the income tax implications or other use of excess soil fertility opinion of value information. And we do not provide legal or accounting advice. Consultation with a tax and or financial advisor is recommended. So yes, we are not CPAs. I don't even play one on TV. So please speak with your CPA. What I'm doing is I'm providing, as a certified crop advisor, as an agronomist, I'm providing you with a snapshot in time of the farm that you've purchased, how much the excess fertility was, how much it was valued at.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and just go again how we get into it, because I think it's a pretty fascinating thing. All right, so you've got a flyer. The flyer is pretty cool to me. It says buying farmland, question mark. So let's start with that one. You've got a bunch of clients and they already own acres. You can't do this with acres you already possess. Is that the first thing we need to understand?
That is correct to a degree. Some of the guidance that I've received from CPAs has been that if you purchased a parcel within the last 3 years, this might be something that you can take advantage of. But for the vast majority of clients, that's correct. This is something that's only going to be applicable to a newly acquired farm.
Okay. So in general, it's either newly acquired or within the last couple of years, 3 years, we'll say. And so your pitch is, and not a pitch, but your sheet says you might be able to save thousands of dollars in taxes. Well, first off, land prices are obviously exceedingly high, right? We could be even at a peak. There's even possibly we're overvalued depending on where you are. And we'll do that I've got another podcast on that subject completely. But farm ground's worth a lot of money, and you're part of the world, Champaign, Illinois. It might be the epicenter of value. You're $20,000 an acre. So if you're buying this farm ground, I guess your angle here is if you're buying a $20,000 piece of farm ground per acre, is there a component of that $20,000 that is fertility that is overdone? It seems like a hard pitch for me to even get around that somehow you've got so much fertilizer or fertility to it that you need to depreciate it. But I'm trying to get my hands around this thing.
Yeah, so I think maybe it might be best if we go over how the process works. Perfect. And then we can kind of talk about some different methods of how you might employ this service. Okay, so this is how it works. You purchase a parcel of land. Okay, so this is at an auction environment, a private treaty sale, whatever. So you have the parcel of land. Okay, now this is where, after that step, this is where some things need to fall in place to be able to take advantage of this. So you need to have soil samples collected pretty close to the time of purchase. So, in agronomic world, I'm typically okay within about a year. If you were to purchase a parcel in this past fall, it'd be really great if you could have the test in the fall, or take them in the spring. The biggest piece is do not apply fertilizer prior to a soil test. Do not apply fertilizer before you have the farm tested.
Okay.
Big piece. Okay.
All right. So I start off with I've got a new purchase and I pull all and the truth is at $20,000 an acre, you should probably know the fertility and the tests before you buy it. But most people don't. Most buyers just buy it as is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's rare. I would say that I see a fresh soil test on a farm that's recently been acquired.
Yeah.
You know, it might be a couple years old, and agronomically, that's probably okay. A pretty good idea. You have a pretty good idea of what might be out there, but being fresh is key with this project.
Okay.
So if you have the soil test taken, that's great. If you have a company that you're working with that you like, that's great. We can still do this. You can provide me those results and I can do this service. Now, my company also does soil testing, and right. we can take care of everything. So we can go two routes with it. Mm-hmm. Okay. So
so what you got there is a baseline, and then I guess what I want to know is, are you saying that there's a chance that it's got more than is necessary to grow a crop? Because that seems like it could be an arbitrary decision.
Sure. Yeah. So the beautiful thing about this, I base all of my standards off of land grant university information. Good. So in my case, I work a lot in Illinois, of course. So I base my standards for Illinois parcels off of the University of Illinois. Let's just take that, for example. So the University of Illinois says you need this much phosphorus per acre and this much potassium per acre, and that's considered optimal for crop production. Okay, so when we have those soil tests and we find out that you have an X amount above those optimal values, that's where this excess piece comes in. Okay, so we take that excess amount of nutrients that's above and beyond what the land grant university says, and I say, okay, there's this much nutrients. At the time of purchase, the USDA says that the fertilizer was worth this much, and I marry those numbers together, and I spit out a per acre value on that excess fertility.
Yep.
So it's beautiful because I'm using quasi-governmental information.
Absolutely. So, you didn't just pull this out of thin air. You looked around and said, okay, University of Illinois says here are base level fertility levels that you should have, baseline fertility levels you should have. And it turns out you're in excess of that. And so to the tune of, and then you go against market value today, say, all right, a price of a ton of nitrogen is worth this, a ton of phosphates. And do you even down to macros or micros? I'm sorry.
So currently we are only doing this on phosphorus and potassium.
Okay.
So that's not to say in the future that the others won't come into play, but all of the documentation and articles I've read on this, it has just been the macro, the P and K currently.
Okay.
Yep.
So from that standpoint, why not nitrogen? Because of the volatility? Because nitrogen as a volatilization? Why not in the other of the big macros?
Yeah, so we get this question a lot in the consulting side, and why we don't test a lot for nitrogen. You know, nitrogen is just a tricky nutrient that's very hard to get an accurate reading. I mean, we have a lot of good tests, but it's very hard to get an accurate reading. And in my mind, that would open up someone to some trouble potentially with the IRS if there's not a standard operating procedure for a nitrogen test. You try to claim it. I would have some concerns.
Okay. All right. So you're doing it on the P and the K. And you're saying on market prices today, and we're doing the conversion. I mean, a ton of fertilizer, then how much percentage of it is actually raw P or whatever that thing should be. You have an extra $1,000 an acre. Is that a number that makes sense?
That would be very possible. Absolutely. I tell people it is not hard for me to find between $200 and $500 per acre. And it's certainly not out of the question for me to find over $1,000.
Okay, let's go with $500. That's an easy number. So now I've got $500 of excess fertility on a parcel of farmland that I bought last year. Now I go about it. How do I make that become a tax? How do I turn that into a tax deduction?
Yeah. So I'll provide a report that states that you have an excess amount of fertility value of $500. And I have a 5 or 6 page report that details all this out. You provide that to your CPA or tax professional, and they will then apply that to your taxes. Most of the guidance that I've received has been that most folks are able to take this over 1 year. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I do provide in my report an exhaustion period. So how many years can this excess amount of fertility last you?
Yeah, because then the argument on this is, I want to hear about using it over time. By the way, now's a perfect time to talk about, because you want to make more money on your acres. If you want to make more money on your acres, you need to look at stuff besides just selling corn, beans, wheat, rye, sorghum, sunflowers. You need to look at ecosystem marketing. Ecosystem marketing is this concept now where, let's face it, farm owners, farmland owners, farmers are in a situation where right now we're tying into climate. I just got an USDA publication with the whole Earth Ag Week, and it talked about climate. The point is, whether you are a subscriber to all of the climate hysteria or not, there's money out there to be made. And why don't you participate in that? You can do that with Truterra. Truterra is one of my business partners here at the Business of Agriculture podcast. They support farmers at every stage of the sustainability journey to help plan and maintain regenerative management practices. So the point is, maybe you can do some cover cropping. Maybe you can do some reduction of tillage and actually then turn it into a annual paycheck. Go to truterraag.com, truterraag.com, TRUTERRA ag.com to learn more about this. All right, Alec, then the question is going to be, well, wait a minute. When you're growing 250 bushel corn, which is easy to do in central Illinois, that excess fertility, hell, that'd get burned up in the first year. There's no way you're telling me that excess fertility can be depreciated out over 3 to 5 years, because it's going to be gone. So how do you come up with then the time frame and the terms on the depreciation?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So my estimates included in the report are going to be based off of average yields or yields that would not be uncommon for that area. And so, yeah, we say 250 bushel corn, 75 bushel beans, and through my spreadsheet, everything calculates out and shows how many years it might take to burn that excess amount.
But the reality is, don't most people, me included, generally, I want as much depreciation as I can use. In other words, a 30-year depreciation on the improvements to my barns, that's cool, but it's not really enough money to really make a huge difference in year one. In other words, if you're amortizing it over 30 years, it's like, hey, this is nice. I've got, $8,000 of depreciation every year for the next 30 years. Well, $8,000, if your income is decent, doesn't change your tax liability by, millions. It's just a small amount. So in this case, it might be better because I can get it all knocked out like in one big year. Is that what most of your clients would be looking for?
I think so. I think most of my clients have taken this over 1 year. When you're talking, here's a good example. I did a report early this year. The gentleman had about $800 per acre in excess fertility value. So across the parcel, that was about $70,000. He provided that to his accountant, and they elected to take it over 1 year. Now, this gentleman is a wealthy doctor, so it was an absolute no-brainer for him to take it over that 1 year. Some other folks, I think, if the excess amount is not ultra high, obviously that makes more sense for a 1 year. But if you have maybe $1,000 per acre, you might take it over 2 years. That's going to be a decision that's best left up to your CPA, your tax advisor. Yep.
I understand. All right. So it's not nothing, but it also isn't so much that it's going to change your, it's not going to change your tax game for the next decade. It's probably going to be the next 1 to 2 years. Do you think that there's a person that's now going to buy farm ground using this as the justification, or is this a cherry on the top? To me, it looks like a cherry on the top.
I think for most folks, it's a cherry on the top. The one situation that I would say it might help you make a decision to raise that paddle at the auction one more time, or to throw some more money at a seller, would be the situation where you go into a sale knowing that, hey, I'm betting there's probably $500 per acre in excess value. Yep. Okay, so you're going into the sale saying, if I need to raise that paddle one more time to make sure I get this parcel, I know I can throw another $500 at it. Yep. and net out, basically.
Yeah, I like that. That's probably the right. Now, you and I both know lovers of the land, meaning farming people, they don't usually need an encouragement to raise the paddle. Right. They might raise the paddle sometimes to their own detriment,
but when you're talking that $20,000 an acre,
yeah,
there's a little bit of a mental block to get over there, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. So, and there would be for me. It seems crazy, and it's not worth that where I am. I'd say that sure. 12 probably is the number around me, but I haven't monitored a recent sale. What else? Because this is right in there in that, and I know that you're not the CPA, and I've had on the farm CPA. Paul Neefer is a farm CPA, and he's been on my air and he's been on this podcast. And by the way, if you really want to go to the best agricultural CPA, right there, Paul Neefer, go find him. Go back and find one of my old episodes. And you can hear what he has to say. But
I agree.
Generally, this is how you know Paul, right?
I've consulted with him on this project.
Perfect. So his statement was.
He said this is something that is commonly taken advantage of.
Got it. So it used to be when we thought about Section 180, Alec, it was normally, I think of drainage tile in our part of the world, which a lot of parts of the world don't do drainage tile. They don't have a need for it. But in our part of the world, get 40 inches of annual precipitation, give or take. You want to make sure that you're able to get in there in the spring. You put it in drainage tile. We used to talk about farmers are having so much of a good year, they're burying their money because literally you go out and put plastic and you bury it in the ground. That's normally where Section 180 came into play. Am I right? Or the most common, I should say the most common application of using Section 180. Am I right?
You are right. Most folks know about the fact that you can depreciate tile, yep. fences, buildings, and for whatever reason, it might be a combination of up until recently, folks weren't maybe pouring the coals to fertilizer. So there was maybe never a situation where there was an excess or it was rare. For some reason, folks have not taken advantage of this until recently. Yeah.
Now you talked, okay, so yeah, and by the way, if drainage tile, because I'm going to probably be putting some in, that's a 1 year. Usually I burn that up in 1 year, or I can burn it up over a couple if I need to, right?
Sure. Yep.
2 to 3.
Yeah. And again, it's going to be all about how you are playing the tax game.
Yeah. What about then if there's a person listening to this that says, well, I over fertilized a piece of ground that I own, and it wasn't a purchase of the new property. I just accidentally put on more than I needed, or I need to spend some money to get it off my books. And can I get the expense of the fertility and then also the depreciation? Is that a possibility?
I do not believe so. I believe the only route you can take there is getting that expense.
Okay.
Because this is only available on the buyer side at purchase.
Understood. Okay. And so that's the other part of it. Then a seller doesn't get any benefit out of this. A seller doesn't get to do anything about, reducing their capital gains. It's only on the buy side is what your sheet says here.
That's correct. Yes. And I think a lot of something I like to go over with clients too is, okay, you purchase this parcel of land, you're going to take advantage of all the depreciation that you can. Okay. And then the question becomes, well, what happens on the back end when I want to sell it?
Right.
Okay.
Do I have to reclaim the depreciation? Is that the idea?
So the IRS will want to recapture that change in basis. So what this does essentially reduce your basis in a farm in the property.
Okay.
Now, the vast majority of my clients are owner operators, and they have no intention of ever selling the farm,
Right.
because they play the 1031 game.
Yeah.
And so in theory, you take the depreciation where you can, later down the road, you 1031 out the parcel, and the old adage of buy and die, essentially.
Yeah. By the way, to the person that's listening to this that's not as well versed as you or me, I've done 1031 exchanges a couple of times with real estate properties. Just give the quick, again, realizing that neither of us are CPAs, so that the person listening says, wait a minute, this is something I might do, but I don't know for sure what he's talking about now. What's that mean, 1031?
So a 1031 exchange, in other words, like kind exchange.
It's a tax code number, which is how it came up with the 1031, but yes.
Correct. Yep. So, and I have not done one myself. I just listened to a seminar myself recently. Essentially, you defer the capital gains taxes when you sell a parcel of land by essentially trading that land. Trading, it might be not the right word, for a property that is similar. And that could be farmland to a real estate investment property, something that you are using as a business practice. In most cases, it would be like collecting rents type situation. So you defer the taxes, and a lot of folks use this to keep on rolling properties to appreciate in value and not avoid. Defer
yes.
taxes.
Yes. So in other words, you buy it, if you're farm ground, you bought it for $2,000 and now it's worth 10. There's $8,000 of capital gain. You would have to pay probably, depending on your tax rate, 20% of the $8,000 gain to Uncle Sam, unless you sold that $10,000 piece of farm ground that you were only in for $2,000 of purchase price. If you bought another piece of farm ground and rolled that money, you would defer the capital gain. And it doesn't have to be from farm ground to farm ground. As you said, like kind exchange is kind of a broad definition. It can mean rolling from piece of farm ground to an apartment building. I actually sold an investment, a residential condominium that I owned as an investment, and rolled it back into farmland, and it completely cleared. It was fine. And you have to use a 1031 approved transaction firm that actually holds the money. You're not allowed to touch the money yourself. So anyway, we're not here for tax advice. I just wanted to touch on that. So the point is, back to this section 180 of the tax code and using it for depreciation of excess fertility. Your point was a couple of biggies here, because I think we can about wrap up this topic. You can't do this on land that you've had for a decade in general. It's stuff you bought in the last couple of years, right?
Correct.
Yes. Okay. Other big takeaway. You probably are going to use the depreciation in about the first year or two of excess fertility, because it's probably not tens of thousands of dollars per acre. It's about, we think on average, your experience so far has been, the average was
$200 to $500 per acre is very easy for me to come up with.
Very easy to come up with. You're doing this on the excess fertility, in particular between the two big macronutrients of phosphorus and potassium. That's the other big takeaway. The big takeaway was, you better have new current soil survey, soil analysis from a fertility standpoint.
Yes, as close to the time of purchase as possible. And again, you need to be able to answer the question that, no, you have not applied fertilizer before you had that soil test taken.
Got it. And then is there any other big takeaways I might have missed on that? Because I think this is interesting information. I don't know that it's going to, like you said, I don't think it's going to change land purchasing.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I think it's a great tool to have in your pocket as you're buying land. And really, for the fees that I charge to do this, in the story I told earlier about the $800 per acre, what the gentleman paid me was only about 1% of his potential savings.
Yeah.
So it's, my fees easily recovered, and you get to do some depreciation I think it's a cherry on top.
Yeah.
Anybody that's buying land should absolutely at least look into this.
Yeah, I think that's all absolutely 100% accurate. Don't we normally, by the way, think of the other situation? Normally we think of buying land that's depleted and has not only doesn't have an excess, it doesn't even have adequate fertility.
Absolutely. That is the case occasionally. And the one thing about how I do this, if you contact me and would like to look into this, and if you have soil tests or if you need my company to do the testing for you, if we come back and we say, hey, there's not an excess here, I'm not going to charge you for this service. I'm going to charge you my normal soil testing fee. So at the end of the day, you get a fresh test, you see where you're at, and you get some recommendations on the back end as well.
Okay. So I like it. This is, like I said, I was really appreciative that you sent me this because this is a topic that I don't get. If anybody wants to learn more about this, I think the graphic that you provided me here is kind of a cool little one-page graphic. Can they find that at your website?
Absolutely. Yep. And then too, I can provide it via email or mail, however someone would like to see that as well.
Got it. So how do we find you?
Yeah. So my website is www.asmlabs.net.
asmlabs.net.
Yes.
asmlabs.net. His name is Alec Bean. I really appreciate you being here. This is a cool topic. Do you see this, last thought on the way out the door, do you see this growing? I mean, are we going to now say, well, wait a minute, I found another new thing we can start depreciating out, and to help throw some more reasons to heap some more fuel on the fire of land sales?
Sure. I think there's always ways to be creative. I was just reading before we got on here about some folks actually on a timberland investment. They had more or less depreciated the size of the trees, and I need to learn about it more. But I think as long as there's folks that are willing to really dig in, I think we can find a lot of unique ways to work things like this.
And depreciating the size of the trees, meaning that they were already mature?
They were mature, and they had a forester come in, do a survey, and say, hey, at the time of purchase, these trees were this size, and now they're this size, and they worked it backwards. I need to learn more about it, but there's some really neat things to be done in this space.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, and then obviously your business is agronomic consulting, not timber consulting. So again, you're just sharing an anecdote from something you heard at one of your conferences, but that's interesting. On the agronomic side, I think this is fascinating because we always thought about drainage tile or above ground improvements. Yes. Buildings and fences and infrastructure. And now you're talking about something like this. So this is really interesting. So if you got more questions on this is a cool deal. You can look up Alec, asmlabs.net. Really appreciate you bringing this topic to us. Maybe come back another year or two and fill us in on what you've seen and what this new horizon looks like. Will you do that?
I would absolutely love to do that. Be honored.
Cool. All right. His name's Alec Bean. My name is Damian Mason, and this is the Business of Agriculture. Hey, thanks for being here. This episode of the Business of Agriculture was brought to you by Pattern Ag. You've heard me talk about Pattern Ag because I think it's a pretty cool concept. New technology that allows you to predict the problems you're going to have and therefore treat them before those problems cost you money. What kind of problems am I talking about? Pests and disease. Things like cordon rootworm, sudden death syndrome, cyst nematode, and a whole bunch of other bad things that happen out there in the field that can cost you money. Guess what? Pattern Ag will let you find out ahead of time if the disease or the pest pressure is there, and therefore you're treating it before it costs you any money. What a great concept. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to learn more about their product, their technology, how it can make you money, save you yield, and also where you can find a rep that can come out there and do the work for you. Pattern.ag.